they measure your
This is usually the time when it's good to punish people with PowerPoints, but you thought ahead. You didn't provide a screen, that's good.
I don't know, I thought maybe you'd rather just look at people's writing. So Mark is the soil or scientist for organic agronomist. Well, you're the soil guy too. But yeah, and you might know Mark already, but he's going to give you a little overview and then we're going to go outside. So that's the second part we have up here, overview of soil health. You're going to need it?
Thanks, Nadia.
Yeah, sure.
This is a pretty knowledgeable group, so I'm not going to sit here and preach to you guys. I thought what I would like to do is find out what you're interested in. You know, are there particular areas of soil health that you'd like to talk more about? I wish I could have gotten here earlier today, but just in the last half an hour when Peter was going through some of the stuff out there on the pastures, there was a great conversation that covered a lot of the stuff that I was thinking maybe we should talk about. So thank you for introducing some of those topics, but just throw it open. Is there anything in particular that you guys would like to discuss? If not, I am.
All right.
Yeah, let's see what you got.
What's the silver bullet?
Okay. Well, I did want to touch a little bit about fertility, and I'm not sure how comfortable everybody is with interpreting soil tests and things like that. If that's something that you're not real comfortable with, there's people that can work with you. And then there's that bulletin, that UW bulletin on fertilizing pastures, really does a pretty nice job of giving you a basic overview of what to look for with the UW types of soil testing. So that's a nice reference. But one of the things that Peter mentioned out there, and then somebody else in the audience chimed in just before he talked about applying gypsum to his pastures. Somebody mentioned ammonium sulfate back a while ago. Was it you, Lyle? Okay, all right. And the common theme there between ammonium sulfate and gypsum is sulfur. And sulfur is so important, and it's particularly important. You know, we're always concerned about yields whenever we're growing a pasture or a crop of any sort like that, and yields are important. But in this business, in dairy, especially in organic dairy, this forage quality thing is so very important. And whether it's ammonium sulfate in a conventional system or gypsum in an organic system, or it could be gypsum in a conventional system too, but that sulfur application every year is really important. Not just for yields, not just for quality, but for getting the whole system to work well too. I'm glad to see, I'm retired from UW Extension, so I can pick on the UW a little bit. I'm really glad to see some of the modifications that we've made to the pasture fertility recommendations compared to back a long time ago when it was just boron and nitrogen, and we'll get some phosphorus and potassium out there too. I think this is a lot more moderated approach here that we're looking at today. And of course, like we talked about out in the pasture there, if you've got a nice mixed water with a good legume content out there, and you're grazing animals through here many times in the season, for heaven's sakes, we don't need to add nitrogen, you know? But if you don't have sulfur out there, the legumes that are out there in that sward are not going to be able to do their job like they're supposed to. Sulfur is involved with nitrogen metabolism in the plant. So if we're going to try to get the most out of the biological nitrogen fixation that we want to have happening in the pastures, it's important to provide that sulfur. And just like Peter mentioned, just like boron, sulfur also does not stay put in soils very well from year to year. So the two things about that are that, first of all, because it doesn't stay put very well, it's kind of pointless to try to bring your soil test levels up for boron and sulfur, because the soil just cannot hold very much. Rather than doing that, if we just spoon feed some sulfur and some boron every year to those pastures, we're going to give them what they need, and I think we can see some beautiful results out there. You have a question?
Sure. For gypsum, can you mix that with manure, or if you're making a compost
Yeah.
as a way to maybe you're applying two things at once rather than making a separate application?
Yeah.
I know that gypsum is supposed to be highly soluble, so I don't know, does it degrade?
Not a solid manure. That's a really good point. If for anybody who's using pack manure or solid manure of any sort like that, if you know about how many acres you're going to be treating with that manure each year, you can put in the amount of gypsum that you want to apply to to that land area. And it does a couple of things. Besides killing two birds with one stone and just making one application, the sulfate in the gypsum is calcium sulfate, that sulfate ion will bind with ammonium in the manure, and it'll keep it from volatilizing. So the manure will smell better, but more importantly, you're going to save that nitrogen and get it back out there on the pastures where it can actually do some good. So that's a really good point. Now, don't do that in a pit, please. Unless you do it just while you're getting ready to spread, like the day before you're going to spread. Because by adding more sulfur into the pit, what we're doing is generating more sulfide. And that stinks, but more importantly, it's dangerous. So
You can add it to solid, but not to liquid.
right. You can do it with liquid, but do it basically when you're getting ready to agitate and spread.
Okay.
So it's not sitting there.
But
So,
in a composting situation, the
perfect.
timing of it wouldn't matter when you incorporate it?
Well, I mean, the earlier on you do it, the more nitrogen you're going to maintain. Because you
Okay.
do, you know, nitrogen is the thing that we lose the most of when we compost. We lose a little sulfur too. But nitrogen is what we really lose the most of in a composting process. Everything else is just getting condensed into a smaller package. So you still have the same amount of phosphorus, you still have the same amount of potassium, same amount of micronutrients in a smaller volume now. So the pounds per ton goes up in compost usually, except for nitrogen. So that would be a way to improve the nitrogen component
Okay.
of the compost. So just wanted to reinforce that discussion out there. Yeah.
I just have a question about composting. If you, say if you had a perfect system on concrete and you could collect the urine, what is the nutrient value of the urine that you may lose if you're just, composting on the land?
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
So let me ask if I'm understanding the question right, Kevin. What is the nutrient difference in urine versus manure, or is it better to
say you wanted to compost but you don't have the perfect system of, concrete yard or
Yeah.
whatever to do that? What kind of loss are you looking at from just the liquid? Right?
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Here's a little trivia thing that's really useful. Okay, when a cow excretes stuff from its body, almost all of the potassium is going out in the urine. There's very little potassium in the solid manure. Phosphorus is the opposite. There's hardly any phosphorus in the urine. Almost all the phosphorus is in the solid manure. So if you have a system where you're composting and you're not able to capture the urine, you're going to have a finished compost or stored manure, whatever the case may be, with a lot lower potassium content than you would if you could capture everything and keep that preserved. The other thing about that is that potassium is very soft. And so if your pile is sitting out in the weather and it gets rained on and there's rain and rain and rain like you may have had recently, you could leach a lot of potassium like that. So ideally, if you had a covered area to store your manure and compost it in, that would be perfect. And capture every drop of manure, every drop of urine. That would be absolutely perfect. But it's the real world, so yeah.
I think cattle are working on pasture. I just think the urine deposits out there on pasture, we're so much of a benefit. You look at, I always thought, what's the difference? You store manure up by the buildings versus wintering. There's a difference. As a raising specialist over the years, I definitely noticed that. The area photos everything. Walking this pasture, you see what a difference. And I think that, that potassium that we lose a lot of times around our buildings is put out there. And that's an important part of our winter.
Yeah.
Besides organic matter.
That's a really good point. And the farms throughout most of the Midwest, we have a hard time on most farms keeping hold of potassium. When you think about the way a cow behaves, you go out in the morning, wake the cows up, bring them in. The first thing they do is what? Exactly. Poop, and usually they pee. So that's good. That's out on the pasture. But then, do any of them ever let go on the lane on the way back? Oh yeah. So that's gone. Most people aren't crazy in their lanes. And then once you get to the holding area, what kind of a system do you have? Is it just running off the edge and soaking into the ground? Or is it going into a containment facility of some sort? So all those things play into it. But, on dairy farms, it's a lot harder to keep potassium on a dairy farm than a beef farm, because every time the milk truck leaves, you're sending out a load of potassium too. There's actually more potassium in milk than there is calcium and phosphorus. You know, think about calcium and phosphorus all the time. There's more potassium than there is either calcium or phosphorus. So it's a lot of potassium here.
How do you determine how much you have to add? I mean, if you go, in terms of potassium, how does a person determine?
How much of a rate to put on, or?
Yeah, I mean, how do you go about that? I mean, if you go by the, for example, in our case, if I go by my nutrient management plan, I'd be great. And now, what do we use? Do you use, of course, to get the yield? It's halfway a check, right? Are we doing enough? Do you use in the forage sample, or how does a person go about that? What's
Yeah.
the best way?
That's,
For, common user thing.
well, I'll answer, but can I ask how you do it?
Well, we don't use any,
You don't use any, but you're buying feed in.
so,
So, and do you feed grain or not? No, okay. But, you know, when you buy in forage, every ton of forage has approximately 50 to 60 pounds of potash in it. So when you buy feed in, you're bringing a lot of potassium back onto the farm. With grazing, of course, you know, I think you guys all know, you're recycling most of what the cows eat, except we do capture that calcium and phosphorus and potassium and a little bit of the micronutrients that goes out with the milk. But other than that, you know, we can recycle probably, on a good grazing system, we can probably recycle 2/3 of what the cows are eating. So as far as how much to put on, you know, what I would suggest is start with the soil test. The soil test is a great tool. It's not perfect. And it's better for some nutrients than it is for others. With potassium, it's pretty good. It's really pretty reliable for most of the time. And with pastures, just like you'll see in the UW bulletin there, you don't need to have as high potassium levels for good forage production in pasture as you would if you were harvesting hay. Because when you harvest hay, you're hauling everything off the field. And with the pasture, you're recycling it. But start with the start with the pasture, start with the soil sample, the soil test. But then, I also really encourage people to use a wet chemistry forage test. Now, you're not going to go out there and do every field and every batch of forage that you take off and every grazing and all that, but do a handful. Try to do a handful each year, where you've got soil tests to go with them, preferably, so that you can see how the soil fertility is being expressed in the forages. And the reason I say wet chemistry is because I'm also interested in micronutrients. And I don't want to have just a guess, you know, from a beam of infrared light shining through the sample as it passes by. I want to have it measured. And that's what you're getting with the wet chemistry forage test. So you'll find out for sure what your sulfur level is. You'll find out for sure what your boron and phosphorus and potassium and all those things. And that's the other part of the sulfur that I forgot to come back to, is that not only is that sulfur important in the plant, but that sulfur is very important in the feed too. And Greg can talk a lot more intelligently about this than I can, but sulfur is a component of a couple of amino acids. And if you don't have enough sulfur to go with the nitrogen that the plants are taking up, the plant isn't going to be able to produce those complete proteins that we would like to see. And it's not going to produce as much of it. The plant will still continue to take in nitrogen. They're very happy taking in nitrogen, but it's going to sit there in amino compounds and different forms of nitrogen. There will be some ammonium, there will be some nitrate, and that plant will have all kinds of nitrogen that'll look like protein on the forage test, but it's not. It's just nitrogen. So without that sulfur, we're going to be limiting our ability to make that good quality feed. And then those micronutrients are so important. Again, not just, we always dwell, when we're looking at soil tests, we're always dwelling on crop yield, pasture yield. And that's great, but those micronutrients also are very important because they're cofactors for the enzymes that the plants need to produce all of these organic compounds that they're supposed to, all these secondary metabolites and everything else that the plant is supposed to have in it, that also confer good health on the animals. So please look at that whole picture. And we're proud of it.
Oh, just a couple people were at our last talk, and we talked some about NIRS. Can you remind us again, or tell us again, the difference between the wet chemistry and the NIRS, and again, why you think one is better?
Yeah, NIR is near infrared spectrum tool for looking at fiber levels in forages, as far as, you know, how much protein there measure so much, but how much NDF, how much ADF. But then we want to also have the NDF-B, the digestible NDF. We want to have that measured. And when you do an NIR test, depending on the lab, they'll give you an estimate usually about how much calcium and phosphorus and potassium you would expect to see in that. But it's just based on averages. It's not truly measuring what's in that plant. We want to actually measure. So that's the difference with wet chemistry. They're dissolving that sample, and then they're actually analyzing that sample. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Peter.
Just want to make a side note there. The last basketball we was on seeing on the GPAs, and we came home and focused on the wet chemistry.
We did.
Yeah, we usually do it once a month, first week before the sample, and we decided to do the wet chemistry. And then, long story short, nutrition I determined we can pull all the that cow out of it, you know.
Really?
So we paid for the wet chemistry easy.
Nice.
I thought it was kind of good running, just
Cool.
a side note.
Hey, that's really great. So it paid for itself, maybe, huh? Nice.
So, but you gotta find out, that's the lesson, you gotta find out what's truly in it, and that's,
Yeah.
we did wet chemistry, and our nutritionist 20 years ago said for a grazer, if you're taking infrared, you're missing it, because it's a total different sample than what you're used to getting.
And if you've got a lot of, whenever you've got a lot of feed, I mean, if you've got a lot of first crop and maybe it was rainy when you wanted to get out there, but that's what you've got to feed, it's good to have that information just so that you know how to put your ration together or what kind of minerals you're going to use. But if you're going to do it to try to marry it up with the soil test, it's best if you use good quality dairy feed. When that plant is at the peak of its performance, because that's really what we're aiming for, and that's what we're trying to correlate back to fertility, so that if there's any tweaking that we need to do, that's the kind of food that we want to be tweaking for. I would kind of, if there's other stuff that you guys would like to talk about here, that's great. But otherwise, I'd kind of like to go outside and poke around a little bit. And I think Greg has some things that he wants to show us too, as far as looking at leaf numbers and calculating grazing area maybe, or.
Yeah.
And-
Let's do it.
All right.
Are there any other burning questions for these guys? Looks like one more.
Just one more,
Yeah.
just on legumes, basically, that's the highest demand, for potash that may be expensive to do on a whole farm basis. But, the different types of legume other than just alfalfa,
Oh, yeah.
what kind of research is into what's taking it, what has the most efficient use of potassium?
As far as the most efficient use of nutrients,
Yeah.
there's some differences between species, and we always think about legumes needing more calcium and phosphorus compared to grasses. But really, when you measure it, what you've got in the forage, it's still within a fairly tight range, 12 to 15 pounds of phosphate and 50 to 60 pounds of potash. Corn silage is a little different, but comparing grasses to legumes and clover to alfalfa, trefoil to clover, things like that, it's all in that fairly tight range. But the thing about the diversity is really important, Kevin. Thanks for bringing that up. And we'll see this again when we go outside here, but it was just remarkable to me seeing the beautiful sward density that Peter has out there, but also the diversity. He's got the ryegrass, he's got the white clover, but there's also the dandelions and the plantains, and I'm sure there might be a thistle out there somewhere. I didn't see too many. You mentioned something about. Did you mention something about ragweed? You disguised that really well. That's But those things are very important because, like Greg said too, not only do we have this thing with slightly taller grazing, where we've got a little bit more root activity, but while the plants are growing, these plants are pumping out exudates through their roots. So they're pumping out carbohydrates and proteins and enzymes and all these things, and they're doing that to feed the biology in the soil. And the more different species that we have in a fairly small area, the more dense that is, And the more vigorous the growth, the more of those exudates are going to be pumped out into the ground while that plant is alive. And then you get that pulsing effect that comes when we graze that. And we remove part of that top portion. We also let some of the roots slough off. And then there's more food for the microbes. And, you know, we're talking, Peter mentioned a little bit about the changes in his organic matter.
You're good.
And my alarm was going off. About the changes in the organic matter. And then pulsing is part of it, you know, leaving those root fragments behind when they slough off and so forth. But also, all of those organic compounds that the plants are pumping into the soil, why do they do that? You guys know. Why are they pumping stuff into the soil instead of just putting it into their tissue? If they were selfish, they would just grow it, right? They're generous. They pump this out so that they can feed this microbial community in the rhizosphere, right? And we used to think that organic matter, you know, as it goes through all of its stages of decomposition, what we end up with as humus, the stable stuff that stays there, you know, that's got cation exchange capacity, holds moisture and things like that. We always thought that most of that came from really carbonaceous types of organic matter, you know, high lignin stuff, lots of cellulose, lots of stuff that wasn't very digestible down there. And that is true that there's a portion that comes from that. But what we've learned is that actually a lot of humus comes about from the bodies of microbes that have died. It's basically their skeletons. And so the more microbial activity that we have, even if it's bacterial, which, you know, we didn't used to think bacteria contributed to humus really at all, other than helping to break things down. But the bodies of the bacteria and the actinomycetes and the fungi and the nematodes and all that stuff, you know, there's portions of those that aren't digestible, and that's where a lot of our humus comes from. So the more microbial activity that we have going on in the soil, the more quickly we're going to be able to develop humus. So it's just a cool system. You know, everything feeds into the next and the next and the next. So like we talked about. Yeah, question.
Are the MUN numbers correlate with the complete and incomplete proteins in a particular farm or the calorie?
Yeah, I think they can be, but they're still, even if you've got good complete protein, if you've got too much of it for the amount of energy that you've got to deal with it, you can still have high MUNs, even with good quality protein. Right, Greg?
That's right, yeah. It does help, but not in the other situation.
Both the same way, is that happening? Both? Is that any correlation at all?
Yeah, there is a correlation. So some people think that the nitrogen-containing compounds in legumes, if we've got protein being made in there, or not enough sulfur-containing amino acid-containing proteins in these legumes, that they're going to release more compounds that will cause growth.
One baseline,
Yeah.
So that's why earlier grazers get bloat and the later grazers don't? You think about that one? Because when I started grazing, I had bloat, and after a while, I pretty much, I don't know what.
You mean like going out later in the spring, having a little more mature grass? And going
No,
through that?
You mean your soils are more.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I think that's the, because
Sure.
at the beginning, we had growth, and at the end, everybody asked me, well, it's like, no, it's not even an issue now. I don't know, I mean, but what you're saying then would make sense,
It
because
does
your
definitely
organic
help.
matter and your soils are getting to the point where.
Getting healthy.
Right.
Getting healthy.
So that makes sense.
It's not a guarantee. Yeah, and the cows get used to that.
Peter, do you have much trouble with flow?
I don't say it too loud.
Because the two things that came to my mind when we were out there was milk and bloat.
That doesn't, once you
You
get,
know, usually the only, I think, the whole 19 years, I remember one time, it's kind of this time of year, and what happened is, the night before they were tight, and I know my supplements were gone already the night before, it's one of them dump incidents. And I came back out to lock them up, and one of them. That's that only time I seen it, you know, general speaking, you know, make sure you don't want to, you're on the feet, I guess. That makes sense? But, you know, all it takes, so, you know, it's one of them shitty things. But, you know.
Well, you mentioned you keep some dry hay out there when the pastures are.
No,
No?
out by the park, I'm gonna come and go, you know, that's how we,
But they've got access to it each day, or?
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's one of them things, you only put it out once a day, so if the night before, everything's gone, so the next morning you look, and you're coming off the paddock over tight, you're gonna have appetite. So they're gonna get milk and head out to the pasture. That's when it could happen, or frost on the ground that morning or something like that. Good.
I'm just gonna say, you know, this time of the year, around frost time, you know, you got heavier dews than you typically do most of the year. And I don't know, something about, you know, your frost too, it just, you can have a little more of a gassy float. You know,
Oh,
there's always a
especially
chance of that.
Frost.
But you know, room and fill means everything for, before out with the pasture, that means everything. Getting something in room and push gets out.
So let's give Mark a round of applause, because I know you guys